And how are you?
Hello, hello. Hi, Evelina. Hello, everyone watching. Yeah, I am well, thank you. It's nice to see the sun out again today. It's been a while. How are you doing?
Yeah, it is interesting weather, and even though it's raining, but we have these beautiful spells of clear blue sky, which I'm really enjoying. So yeah, it's all good.
Certainly. Yeah, I guess this week it's maybe, you've been thinking about and we've been reflecting on as well, kind of conflict in terms of our needs and maybe our organizations. And you shared a really emotive and vulnerable post on LinkedIn that I think just highlighted the human side of that extremely clearly. And yeah, I wonder if there's anything else that you wanted to say about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think this week would be good to reflect on um, how our external environment shapes our needs and expectations, and then also how sometimes our personal needs, values, beliefs can be in conflict with those external environments, and what can we do about this. And especially when we're talking when we're placing all of this in the context of organizational well-being, when we are spending so much time at work, we have to find a way to balance the needs of the business with our personal needs, right? And also for those of us who are running their own businesses, it's also the same. Even though there are no kind of external environment of external expectations, there are still business needs and business expectations, and there are personal needs, right? So I think it would be really interesting to reflect on this conflict, and what is the difference between this external environment and internal, and is it even possible to balance it out, right? And I know we kind of throw around these phrases of work life balance, but it's not that, right? It goes much deeper than that, because there are it's how we live our life, how we show up, how we bring ourselves into all these different contexts and all these different environments. So it's not just about, a balance of time, or balance of where we invest our energy. It's really how we show up in those different environments. So yeah.
Certainly. And I think a lot of us, sometimes we'll go into areas of work that we feel really deeply aligned with our core values. And some of us don't have that choice. We kind of just have to follow a line where we know that we'll be able to earn a living. But in both of those sides, you are naturally going to come into conflict. So your personal needs will be different from business needs, which is
Mm.
centering the survival and the life and the profit of the business. And you are trying to look after your own well-being. You have your own identity, your own values, and we can feel a real tension and a difficulty in ourselves if we are having to align ourselves with an organization that is maybe in conflict with those personal needs, in terms of the time that they're asking from you, the expectation of like consistent productivity at times in our lives when that might feel less accessible to us. Similarly, the values and the identity of the organization itself or the business, that even if it's your own business, might not be representative of certain parts of yourself and your personal identity and your personal values. And so I guess we're thinking about how do we come to a place where we can internally feel a sense of acceptance about that conflict, but also externally, how do we negotiate those boundaries so that we can both protect ourselves and protect our businesses?
Yeah, there's a question from Laxman. Hi, I was asking, are you from a labor union? Well, not at all. So we are, if you've not met us before, we are doing a lot of research about organizational well-being and overall mental health at individual level. And we are supporting a lot of different kind of entities to make sure that their needs are met from health and well-being point of view. So our goal is to create a healthier ecosystem for health and well-being for all, and our route to that is through organizations, because we spend so much time at work, right? And we really believe that organizations have to take that responsibility and have to step up and create more supportive working environments. So I'm sure our uh, our goals might align with a lot of other organizations who are trying to achieve something and kind of fight for more equal, more inclusive rights. But our goal is really health and well-being of every individual in that way. So um, yeah,
Interesting.
so definitely. Yeah, thanks, Lexan. So it says add packages to all employees and wellness packages. So yeah, it can be. And also, it might be interesting for you. We have received funding from government for the project starting in December to design national guidelines for well-being strategy and measures for how exactly we implement this. So we will be co-designing a lot of approaches with our users. So I see you have plenty of ideas. We'd love to hear them. So I'll share the link with you later on. So and for anyone else who's listening, we'd love to have you on board if you are interested in creating healthier working environments and providing for mental health needs within the business, as well as supporting other people in the ecosystem, right? So other health and well-being practitioners, other well-being service providers. We really want to bring people in into that project and explore. So I see you mentioning Laxman spiritual classes and meditations. Definitely that has a lot of value, but that in itself is not the solution if you have toxic working environments, if you have unhealthy ways of working, if you have again, even from personal point of view, if you are in a toxic relationship, if you are in abusive working environment, all of that, it's not gonna, meditation not gonna solve your gut health issues or hormonal challenges and so on. So definitely we need to look at well-being holistically and strategically. So it doesn't just become a kind of one-off initiative, but we are really making sure that it improves the way we work, the way we live, the way we deliver results in organizations, and it's really kind of challenging that status quo in how we work so that it's in line with our kind of internal personal needs. And like Valentina mentioned, those kind of conflicting states, right?
Yeah.
How can we, so here's a question for audiences, right? So how can we align those needs, right? How can we make sure that our personal well-being needs are not being compromised by expectations of the working environment? If you haven't seen, have a look at the post that I've posted a couple of days ago, and I've kind of very vulnerably shared some of my personal challenges, and sometimes I think as a woman as well, there's a lot of kind of baggage that are associated with motherhood, with being pregnant, with maternity, with all of that excludes you in some ways from some opportunities at work, right? Just by the nature of it. So I've shared some of these kind of limitations, and I think we still so far to go where our environments at work are safe for us to share some of those challenges, right?
Mm.
So if you are going through personal struggles, if you are having some very difficult experiences, including your health, including your relationships, including your parenting challenges, right? It's very very important to consider all of those needs and create that environment. So
Absolutely. And I just
yeah.
wanted to just pick up on as well, kind of thinking about, so like when you talk about wellness packages and spiritual classes, and you kind of going into it now, I think looking at kind of actually how the principles of those things, so the principles that we encounter in spiritual classes or meditation or wellness packages, a lot of mental health apps as well, thinking about the ability to share vulnerabilities, the ability to
Yeah.
have a safe psychological space and a safe physical space, and also the need for balance. So it's all well and good, like we were saying, kind of giving these packages or these classes to individuals in the organization, but let's also just think about maybe the organization taking those classes. So we need
Yeah.
those principles. Organizations can learn still from these initiatives that are at the moment mostly directed towards their employees, and actually it's the decision makers that influence the strategy of the whole organization that can really be taking those principles on board to think about balance and to think about looking after health and
Yeah.
giving space for vulnerability and humanity within a working
Mm.
environment.
Yeah, this comment as well said 100% they need a year vacation, not just 3 months. And this is meaning months, right? So it's interesting. It made me smile because, the word vacation there is very, it implies that maternity is a vacation, right? And that's not the case, right? And I think a lot of the time in working environment, people think that going on maternity or paternity leave at the same time, it's like taking extra holiday, but it is not. Raising a baby is a bloody hard work, right? It's a sleepless nights. You forget yourself. It's all about this little beautiful human being that has all of these needs that it can't express, and it is really really hard work. And yeah, so I think there is very often that, if somebody especially is taking kind of longer maternity break, let's say somebody is off work for 2 3 years because they really value that time spent with their baby, and they want to give them the best that they can, then when people then come back to work, it seemed like there is this huge gap in their professional career, as if you've just been, on vacation for 3 years. But obviously, the realities are very different, and yet it puts a lot of limitations on career progress, and I think definitely that has huge impact on, like gender inequalities and so on. And it's not always about the gender, but the person who is taking maternity or paternity leave will be disadvantaged in some ways from career progress. So it's sad, unfortunately, and definitely um, we have to think about that in a different ways. And this comment here as well, it says money solves most of the things. Yes, money is a resource. It's how we use it that definitely can help to solve these challenges. But I'd love to hear as well, where exactly do you think money should be invested so it does solve those challenges, right?
Mm.
Where shall we invest this money? There's been posts on LinkedIn as well about paying for childcare, for example. So UK is one of those countries with, I think it has like second highest childcare costs in the world. So people sometimes cannot afford to go back to work because they simply cannot afford childcare. I mean, yeah. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of interesting aspects there. So I think from my point of view, I think as a nation, as a country, we should invest in some of those services that allows people to help themselves and to add value to the society. So instead of saying, okay, you cannot afford something, we're going to put you on benefits. No, what is stopping you from working? What is stopping you from adding value to the society, to the world, to your workplace, and providing resources to that? So I think, I'd love to hear some comments and feedback. And I don't know what, Valentina, you think about that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And what that really makes me think about is just, I think a lot of companies need to, and kind of government initiatives we want to widen the scale of how we're looking at, like, look at the macro. So thinking about how if there were, depending on the size of the company and the level of profits, there can be different levels of responsibility in terms of whether it's a government state initiative or whether there's more responsibility on the company. But essentially, by allowing people who have recently had children to take more time off to look after and really, really be present with their children as they're developing and growing up, that changes society in a much grander way that can still enhance profitability and overall economic growth. So if we think about how levels of ill mental health and also neurodevelopmental disorders. So ADHD is one of them, where if we interrupt that attachment attunement process, which is essentially the time that the mother or primary caregiver is having with the child kind of immediately after birth, especially within the first 2 years, it's when we interrupt that attachment attunement process that people become suddenly far, far more likely to develop developmental conditions like ADHD, which end up costing our
society way much more to what we would have invested into that in advance.
And still, it's worth saying though that those people who have that kind of neurodiversity, still actually there's a real value to it as well. So there's a much greater ability to think about on a grander scale, looking at pattern recognition, creative problem solving. A lot of people with ADHD, for example, are very effective at building deeper relationships because of that desire to connect, to attach and attune. So no, I don't want to paint a picture of this as like all negative, because I think there also needs to be space in society for people with neurodiversity and to really celebrate that and look at the value. But I think it's also really important to look at the causes, and considering that we are currently in a society that is not geared around neurodiversity, it is geared around kind of the status quo and this kind of consistent productivity in this post-industrial era. We need to really think about how the kinds of environments that we're bringing children up in. And yeah, I think that it's worthwhile to kind of take a step back and not just think about the individual health of someone within an organization and how to provide for them, because often that can then make us see it as a one-way transaction, like the company or the government is allowing this person to spend
exactly.
time in their
And it's
life.
not really, I think, they definitely, you're right. And there are some comments here as well. Haxman says that, hybrid and remote work solves a lot of those issues, but what about productivity and what about mental health? Great questions, because again, what productivity and what conditions I need for me to be productive and what conditions I need to maintain my mental health might be very, very different to what Valentina needs, what Laxman you need, and what Claudia needs, and so on, right? So we all have very, very different needs. And I think part of the difficulty is that organizations are trying to impose the standard that is the same across all, right? And it doesn't work, right? Because the needs of the person going through menopause, the needs of the person who just gave birth, the father whose responsibilities are not taken in consideration, that he also has a little baby at home and doesn't have the same sleep, yet nothing changed for that person, and yet he's not productive in the same way, right? So there's all of these individual differences that are just not taken in consideration, and organizations have to create a better environment when we learn how to listen and how to really include every individual to say, what do you need for your mental health? What do you need for your productivity? And very often some of those conversations do happen, when it gets to performance management and so on. I say, so what do you need? What can we help? And they say, oh yeah, but we can't provide that because, we don't have policy for that. Or, this is not how it is on paper. So, okay, if those are the needs, then we need to reflect our policies, our procedures, our ways of working. Claudia is commenting here saying that she agrees with what it said. And She says, in my previous experience, I noticed that one of the biggest challenges is to juggle work, career, and family life. This is obviously harder for women, and definitely corporations should improve on that. So, yeah, I think definitely it's all very well talking about kind of gender equality and making sure that we have equal pay, but that is a symptom, right, of something else that is not working well in a working environment. So very often, I think even the goals itself, they say let's improve gender equality. That in itself is an outcome. It's not the goal. In the same way, like sometimes again, if you think we thinking about the climate and you have this uh, net zero carbon as a goal, that is actually an outcome of a lot of other practices of how we work, how we run our businesses, how we produce our food and our clothes and all of that, right? Sustainably. So in exactly the same way, in working environments, a lot of those things that people say they need, it's actually an outcome of something else. So, what is it that we need to change? And we need to really take 10 steps before that and really look deeper to say, so, in order to get to that gender equality, in order to get to that zero net carbon emissions, what needs to happen and measure that, right? Measure the
Absolutely.
progress, measure those small actionable steps. And Valentina probably can tell a little bit more about that with some of her areas of expertise. So, yeah.
Yeah, certainly. And I kind of, even just before looking at the nitty gritty of how that's done, I think it's what this comes down to is coming back to this idea of how do we deal with conflicting needs. And I think that there's a real, we're in this situation where a lot of the time our instinct is to go into a competitive state. So my needs are more important than yours, and we're fighting. So individuals, employees are fighting for their needs to get heard, and companies are fighting to protect their needs as a company.
Yeah.
And instead, actually, I think we need to, on a grander scale, adopt more of an approach of cooperation. So when we meet conflict, fantastic. This is an opportunity to learn about a different point of view, a different set of truths, a different set of priorities from another perspective. And this
I love
is,
that.
yeah, this is where I think that we're kind of, that's the unifying feature, that we need to be able to meet conflict instead with cooperation rather than competition. And kind of, that's something that on an individual scale, I think you just feel release, when you don't feel
Mm.
like you have to be tense, like you're going into battle, like I need to fight
Yeah,
my case.
I
And it's,
love that. Absolutely. I love that idea of, seeing conflict as an opportunity for growth, right? So you're not approaching conflict as, oh my God, this is a threat, that we have to fix, hide, and so on, because that's exactly what creates those toxic working environments. So there's a lot of things that we often hide about ourselves, right? There were years where I was hiding that I'm a single mom, right? For example, because, people think like, oh, single mom doing everything by herself. So, she's not going to be working in a way how she should be, right? Or there's a lot of other things as well about our health, right? It's like if I had an operation and I've been to start, kind of signed off work for nearly 9 months, and yet, I'm coming back to work after 3 months without being able to even lift my hands yet, and have to sit halfway half the stairs because I'm short of breath. There's all of those things that, you know what kind of culture you're in that still makes you believe that you are better off sacrificing your own health just to be there, right? Ra- Rather than really taking that time off and putting your health and well-being first, and then coming back to work with the confidence that you're still going to have the same position, you're still going to have the same pay, and you are not suddenly removed from the track of opportunities of career progression that might happen later on. So yet, most women, well, and again, I'm saying women in this case, because I'm sharing some of my personal example here, but it's true for many other people where you don't want to take that time off to do some other things because that your career will be threatened, right? So if we, like you say, if we create this culture where conflict is good, where there is a challenge and people feel like they have an opportunity to share and bring that in and to celebrate and saying, right, so, we have an opportunity to use this case scenario to actually improve our policies and procedures and how exactly we would support someone in your situation, right? And really learn from that and really try to understand those different needs, then we are growing, right, as an organization. And also, I think, the loyalty that you get from employees when they are truly heard, it's the biggest ROI of any investment, right? So I
Absolutely.
think very often we talk about, let's say, well-being strategy and well-being initiatives, um, as something that needs money, that needs investment, but it doesn't have to be, right? It might be aligning the way you communicate, maybe aligning the way you support people, of the way you listen, what kind of conversations you are having. Um, there can be a lot of smaller things that can add to that well-being strategy and how your people are being supported without really needing huge investments or sometimes none at all, right? And it
Mm.
will add into saving the costs in many ways.
Absolutely. And just kind of thinking about that as well in terms of, data, and is a lot of companies might outsource to gain data about employee well-being on a national scale, but and that costs money. It costs money to gain that research and gain those insights. But you can actually take those insights on a smaller scale, because every single company will have a slightly different demographic, will have a different group of people who will have different types of needs, and that will be
Yeah,
constantly changing. And developing a structure and a strategy to have ongoing conversations with your
yeah,
employees, the actual people that you're serving, is going to be far more specific and beneficial, and in terms of the cost that you're putting out. So developing models to actually be able to respond to the needs as they arise and be flexible and listen to
mm,
your employees can be a way of kind of getting straight to the point. And obviously it can be really useful to then be in touch with wider data sets and wider
yeah,
trends so that you can forecast. But in terms of also developing that culture on the inside, it's so, so important to don't overlook the expertise that you have in
yeah,
your workforce. People, like you're saying, women, men, anyone facing different difficulties or challenges at work in terms of productivity or mental health, anything. These are people that have a huge amount of lived experience and expertise that probably want to share that with you so that they can feel understood and accepted in their
mm,
workplace. And don't overlook that and just only ever look to kind of grander studies or wider national trends. Also make sure, as well as kind of the macro, you're looking at not necessarily the micro, but you're looking
yeah, yeah.
internally as well.
Yeah, the bigger picture of how it all fits into the context of it. So there is Laxman also asking some question that let's say if we have all the data of your employees, how would you improvise? And do you pick productive and kick out the rest? So this is it's kind of in relation to what you're saying, Valentina. Definitely that if you have all the data about employee performance and their productivity, about their own contribution to it, that provides us huge opportunity to look into the shifts and changes and say, okay, so what happened here, right? So if somebody is performing well and then suddenly their productivity drops, very often organizations start performance management process, right? It's like, what happened? We know that you can perform at this level. Why on earth your performance is here, right? But instead, if we can use that as an opportunity to say, what happened here, right? What
Mm,
happened that your performance dropped? How can we support you to get you back on track? And without kind of blame and accusations of you are doing something wrong, looking at what actually happened in your life, in your health, in your circumstances, maybe in a working environment, right?
mm,
That it resulted in your performance drop. How can we fix that? How can we correct that? So I think we cannot have this attitude where if somebody is not performing well, we need to just discipline them, fire them, and so on, right? We first need to look at, are we actually providing the right conditions for this person to perform at their highest potential, right? And
Absolutely.
sometimes, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, just a quick point within that is a really useful shift that I've kind of learned when doing psychologically informed training is, instead of asking a person or asking yourself, what is wrong with this person? Ask, what has happened to this
Yeah,
person?
yeah,
It's not about that something integral is that wrong inside the person. They're choosing not to do something, or they're being lazy, and that's kind of frames things as there's something wrong with the individual. It's not that. It is a pretty much always it's going to be about their circumstances and something that they're encountering, and it's just shifting that focus in terms to think about their environment, or them as a constituent part of their environment, rather than them as a sole individual that houses all of the rights and all of the wrongs, and they simply choose which
yeah.
ones to put
And
forward.
again, it changes even for the same person, right? So I had, so one of my coaching clients, she was a lady in a very senior executive position, and she's performed very well. She's really been through her career, in a very, very quick progress in a short period of time, always delivering and exceeding all of her targets and expectations. And then she went on maternity, and then she came back, and she couldn't find anymore the same drive and the same motivation and the same reasons for work. So from executive coaching point of view, she contacted me and saying, okay, I've lost motivation for work. I cannot perform in the same way. I lost that drive. And it was very, really, really interesting to unpack. And it might sound very obvious, looking from the side, but actually her motivation shifted because her identity shifted. She's not just this executive, right? She's now also a mother, and the needs of the mother doesn't necessarily fit with the needs of that director or whatever role that she was performing, right? So if we don't know how to balance those identities, how to balance those needs of different parts of ourselves, then we forever feel like there's something wrong with us, right? There is something wrong. It's like, oh my God, I used to be this driven, motivated person, and now I just like, I can't force myself to do the same things to the same standard. What's happening? So it's very, very important that we have those conversations because, her employers didn't, right? The fact that she was now a mother was completely dismissed out of her entire career development, and she was just expected to be in exactly the same role, perform exactly the same duties with exactly the same roles. So of course she will be struggling, and her motivations are very different in life, in overall, not just that work, right? So we have to be brave enough to open those conversations, and like you said, Valentina, when there is some sort of conflict, and whether that conflict is kind of in external working environment, or sometimes it's internal conflict, right? Like
Mm,
for the example of that client, she was in a huge state of conflict because she didn't know what else to do. Like, it's like, if this job is not motivating, shall I just leave, right?
mm,
Because there were no options given for her. There were no options that actually, what, it doesn't have to be step up, it can be a step sideways, right?
yeah,
It could
exactly.
be adjustment in some other roles, responsibilities, and even if you go up, that might look differently to what it would have looked like if you didn't have that baby. So
Absolutely.
it's those conversations are never included in our performance reviews, right? So
Mm,
how does this promotion serve your need as a mother, right?
yeah.
How does this promotion will serve the need of you as a wife, as a husband, as a partner, right? How is this promotion serves your long-term vision of where you want to be in your personal life in 10, 15 years time? How does it serve your personal development needs, right? How does it help you to maintain your own health and well-being? Is that the right thing to do, right?
Mm.
And it's not always the right thing to do, and sometimes not everybody wants to progress at all the costs, right?
Yeah, that's it. And I think that it's really important what you say about kind of having this more flexibility and adaptability, adapting a role to a changing person. We adapt roles, we give promotions, right? When somebody's skills develop in a particular area. So why are we still so kind of narrowly focused in terms of that ladder being
Yeah,
like,
and
why
you're
can't
right, you know. And when you talk about that adaptation, like you say, if business needs change, the job role will be adjusted, right? If the
yeah.
business needs change, we will eradicate some job titles, we will create the new ones to reflect the skill set and the roles that are needed to fit the business needs. But what if personal needs change? What if your personal circumstances change? That's supposed to be two-way street, right? It's not
Yeah.
that individual has to constantly mold itself into the changing working environment to provide for the specific growth and productivity and sales and profit, right? But there's a value that we place on each individual's life, on their own happiness, on their
Mm,
own future, on their own growth and development potential, right? There is a hope that we are placing in our future generations, right?
mm,
So we have to be able to include that into our working practices and make sure that those job descriptions and those job requirements and career progress is also adjusted based on changing needs of the individual, not just on the organization. So absolutely, it's two-way street. Yeah.
yeah, completely. And I think that really so much of this boils down to that, just being open and looking at kind of employees don't just work for the organization needs to work for the employees. It really, really needs to be an
Mhm.
equal level kind of two-way relationship, and kind of just letting go of the this competitive side and kind of trying to spend a bit more time in this cooperative mind of like understanding that in listening to somebody else's needs and attending to someone else's needs, you're not necessarily foregoing your own. You are actually just finding a way that both of you, kind of organization, individual, but also in our relationships,
Yeah.
can move through life more harmoniously. And on a bigger picture, that is what kind of means that we have less instances of ill mental health. We have less time off work. We also have kind of just happier societies. But equally, just within an organization, we have higher retention rates and we have a better reputation. So
Yes,
it's really it's
absolutely. Yeah. And
wild.
there's still this huge myth that, we talk about diversity, inclusion, equality, all of those beautiful words that are thrown around, right? And there is this kind of myth that it's really to include someone, to be inclusive, to be equal, to create that diversity, to create that equality. We are doing something to serve that individual that we are including, right? But it's a myth because by not including that individual with all of their diverse needs, you are actually disadvantaging yourself
Mhm.
because now you're denying yourself that potential of that individual to provide their full potential to contribute to that organization, right? So
Yeah.
organizations have to change that mindset that inclusion and equality and diversity and all of these things, it's not for the benefit of that individual. It's really
Not
also
only.
for the benefit of the company because what you are losing by not including them is way, way greater. And you might lose that whole person altogether, either they leave or so on, and that's the biggest loss. But also, if they stay and they are not performing to their full potential because all of these needs are not being met, who is there to lose? It's the company that's losing, right? In
Mm,
that case. Well, obviously, an individual as well, as they never feel
yeah.
like they are able to bring their whole selves and perform to their full potential. But the impact of that on organization is immense.
Absolutely. And I think it's also worth noting, especially as we're moving into a time where we really do have to be a lot more attentive to sustainability in terms of the environment, but also socially, is that companies need to have a balance within their own values, that we are not just serving the needs of the company in terms of productivity, profitability, and retaining people and looking after people just so that they will
Mm.
serve us as a company well, but also looking at who are we as individuals, but as companies in society, what values, what outputs are we contributing to society, and how can that be more sustainable socially, environmentally, economically, and I think that there's a real shift that kind of can happen there, that can affect positively wider society, individuals, companies, in just kind of balancing that priority of, yes, there's profit, but yes, there's
Yeah.
people.
Absolutely. And, people are the biggest assets at the end of the day. It's not some sort of systems that generate your profit over long term. It's people that are building those systems in the first place, right? It's people that are future proofing your business, right? If you have right people in the right places, if they are representatives of your brand, if they trust the company itself, if they are provided for their needs so they don't have a need to leave, right? If they are given all the development opportunities so they can continue to grow and provide to their full potential, that's the biggest benefit of it all, right? So I think definitely there is a lot of culture change that needs to happen to shift that thinking away just from kind of hard financial KPIs and measures, and and really think more holistically about the benefits of true inclusion and true diversity, and really what is the ROI for the company to invest in the needs of each individual, right?
Mm,
And I think, yeah, that's probably kind of nice way of leave with leave it at that. I'd love to hear any other questions as well. So please feel free to share. Anyone still listening, any ideas as well? How is your organization doing that? Any your personal experiences where your personal needs have been met or maybe have not been met, and consequences of that, and how can we do this right? How can we really get the buy-in from the right people to take that responsibility and prioritize people
mm,
and their individual needs, and not create that conflict between external environment of the business and needs of each individual.
absolutely. Yeah, I look forward to kind of hearing about people's experiences.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Valentina. We'll speak soon. And thank you to everyone for watching, for engaging, for asking us questions. And yes, feel free to check some of our other episodes. I think it's episode number, what, 11 now?
Something like
Something
that.
along those lines. Yeah, it's interesting to kind of keep going with this, and definitely as we conduct a lot of research and we have all of these different insights, it's really useful to share this. But we also want feedback, and we also want to make sure that whatever that is that we are creating in our company and what is it that we are researching, it's for everyone's benefit, and we can highlight some issues and challenges
Yeah.
for the greater good.
Yeah.
So thank you. Well, thank you and have a good weekend. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.